Welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com, and if you're watching on our YouTube channel, Tar Heel Illustrated, I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner, and joining me like he always does for the THI Football Postscript Podcast, our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. And Andrew saw a really high-scoring game, an exciting game yesterday in Chapel Hill. Carolina coming out on top 59-53 over the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. It was a game in which let's just say the defenses maybe forgot to get off the bus early on and really throughout the whole game, but really high-scoring affair, really fun one to watch it from a neutral perspective in terms of high-caliber offenses doing some really nice things. So entertaining game to say the least, AJ. But first, let's dive into this. Carolina's been behind by 21 in 3 of their last 5 games. They've come back in this one and found a way to win, I should say. It was a game in which, it didn't look promising for a long time, but in the end, Carolina finds a way. What did we learn about the Tar Heels, AJ, if anything, from yesterday's comeback performance?
Down by 21 at FSU, down by 21 at UVA, down by 21 home against Wake Forest. The 2020 version of FSU is a bad football team, really, and then Virginia and Wake Forest aren't going to, rattle the college football cages with their history and their name and their brands. And I'm not saying that to demean them. It's just the reality. Mm-hmm. So one of the things we've learned is that this football team knows how to fall way behind against mediocre teams. Wake's an okay team, but Florida State's horrible. Mm-hmm. We've seen how bad Florida State is since it beat Carolina. It's been at its very worst. Virginia is they're okay, but they still have a losing record.
Yeah.
So what we've learned a lot of things, actually. One of the things is that Carolina can really, really go through stretches where it doesn't play well. And it doesn't play well against teams that aren't very good. So the talent level isn't what it will be. I think they have execution issues during stretches. I don't know if it's a problem, Jacob, where bad stuff starts to happen and it takes them a while to pull themselves out of it. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're starting to get used to it in the sense that, oh, here we go again. And it takes a while to kind of pull yourself out. We talk a lot about human nature. Well, life is like that with some stuff. We've all been like that. I know I've been like that with things in my life. Mm-hmm. And so it wouldn't be unreasonable to think that that's one of the issues with the Tar Heels. On the other hand, though, they have shown in all 3 of these games that they can pull themselves out of it. Mm-hmm. And it's not just Sam going crazy with his Superman outfit on. In order to make a comeback, it begins on defense in all sports. Mm-hmm. In baseball, you got to get a pitcher in there who gets him out. Mm-hmm. Get him out, give the offense a chance to score some runs, right? Mm-hmm. In basketball, you got to get stops. You hear Roy, you hear all these great coaches say, runs happen when you get stops. Yep. Because if it's 10-10, it's not a run. If it's 10-0, it's a run, right? Mm-hmm. In football, they had to get off the field on defense, and they did. They had a 5-possession stretch where they got off the field, and that changed the game. And it allowed, and Sam and the offense kind of went through the little stagnant period. They picked it up, and I think that the team showed some resiliency on Saturday. They showed some in Tallahassee. They showed some in Charlottesville, but didn't complete the deal. But they completed it against Wake Forest. And I think what they learned from it is that, okay, we know how to get behind, but we also know how to respond from being behind. Mm-hmm. Now we've just got to figure out how to close the deal. They did close it yesterday on Saturday, and they need to maybe, if they get in that situation again, I think they'll then know, okay, we can do this. We can score 35 points in a 17-minute stretch. It was actually 17-14 off the clock. Mm-hmm. They scored 35 unanswered points.
Crazy.
That's scary. So as bad as they were unreal during that stretch. So they got to kind of mesh the two together a little bit and show the world who they are on a consistent basis. So there is so much growing for this team to do, so much growing for this program to do, and we're watching the ebbs and flows of that, growth process right before our eyes. I know it's maddening to the fans that watch this stuff when they think, why can't they be like that all the time? Or why does this happen? Why are they so downright awful sometimes on defense? Why does the offense shoot itself in the foot? It's amazing watching Twitter during the game yesterday, the fire Phil Longo tweets. They've scored 56 and 59 in the last 2 games. Offense is number 4 in the nation right now. Mm-hmm. That ain't the problem, boys and girls.
No.
The
Definitely.
special teams has been pitiful, and the defense goes through stretches where they are what we saw in the Bunting era and what we saw in the Fedora era. They got to fix it.
Mm-hmm. They do. They definitely have to fix it. And you mentioned the defense right there, AJ. That was a perfect segue to the second thing I wanted to touch on. Had a lot of freshmen playing snaps on the defensive side of the ball yesterday. Jaquarius Conley, 29 snaps. Tony Grimes, 29 snaps. We haven't seen a ton of him this year. But, those two guys alone in the second half, especially in that fourth quarter, kind of came in and kind of made that difference, kind of made the defense look a little bit better when they came in. You also had K'Mon Rucker playing 26 snaps, Miles Murphy, 20 snaps, and Clyde Pender, 13 snaps. So you're starting to see more guys on the defensive side of the ball, younger guys, I should say, get opportunities. And I think when you look at just how this defense has played overall this season, I mean, it's kind of a situation now where it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter who you are. If you can go there and do a job better than the other guy can, you got to play. I mean, is that kind of the situation the defense is in right now?
Well, it's not coincidental that each guy, his name that you mentioned, plays defense.
Yeah, exactly.
Clearly, and I mean, so the offense, they're not having to dig into the true freshmen to get them on the field to try to fix something that's not working.
Mm-hmm.
Mac even told us after the game Saturday, he said, put them in, put the young ones out there. I mean, and I'm not being disrespectful to the kids that were out there, but the reality is they can't really do any worse, can they?
No.
I mean, they were getting trucked on defense.
Mm-hmm.
So you got if you're not going to change the scheme, but you're not going to do in midstream, you could tweak some things, and they did make some tweaks. You have to try somebody else. And the freshmen, I mean, they weren't playing for a while. They were kind of sticking with a core group out there, and it wasn't working. There are some guys that played every snap,
mm-hmm.
and we'll talk about that in a minute. But they had to get some life out there. They put Tony Grimes looked like a college football player yesterday. It's very obvious watching him in the Wake Forest game where, okay, that guy that we saw a little bit of early is a different guy now. I mean, it's the middle of November. He should be a different guy. We were told he would be a different guy by now.
Mm-hmm.
And he was on the field when they were getting those stops, when they were getting off the field. Conley, who struggled mightily against BC, the value in that game when he started up at Chestnut Hill and didn't play well was he got to learn. He got to see, okay, I need to improve this, and this. And we saw Saturday some of those improvements, come into fruition,
mm-hmm.
the work that he's been doing. Up front, Wake's one scoring drive late that they had, they're inside the 5, and I saw Pender and Murphy run on the field. And we were told before, well, we're going to play in between the 20s, the young ones, as Matt calls them. They're inside the 5, and he put the 2 freshmen out there. They're bigger, maybe they're stronger. And I think maybe Jay Bateman reached a point yesterday where he said, look, got to play him. I mean, we're giving up a ton of yardage and a bunch of points without them on the field with the other guys. These guys aren't going to really perform any worse. And at least you get them reps. You get them game snaps. And when you start looking ahead to the rest of this season and what can be accomplished and really next year, I think most people that are watching this, if they're honest with themselves, next year is a year this team can be really special.
Yeah.
And they can't go the status quo on defense. They have to get these guys ready. And they're not going to get ready standing over on the sideline watching.
No.
They got to get on the field and play. Maybe not 70 snaps a game, but 29 snaps for Grimes, that's a good number. 20 snaps for Murphy,
mm-hmm.
that's a good number. K'Mon Rucker, 26 snaps. I mean, he should be playing that number of snaps a week anyway. He's grading out in the 70s every game. He's proving to me he's one of their better players, certainly on the defense, and certainly now in the line and that hybrid position spot. He's an effective player. He's a good player. He needs the reps because he's going to get better every time the ball's snapped and he's on the field. So it was good to see. And you could say it's coincidence or not. I don't know. But that's when the defense kind of made its push when a lot of those dudes were on the field. So yeah. I think in a couple of weeks when Notre Dame comes to town, we should see more of them on the field.
Yeah, I agree. I think I really thought the game kind of changed, like you said, in the fourth quarter when you saw – I think it was the likes of – I want to say it was Cam Kelly and DeAndre Hollins were the two guys that kind of went out, and Conley and Grimes were the kind of two guys that came in. I think Trey Morrison kind of moved back to safety as well. So, yeah, I thought that really kind of changed the game, at least in the fourth quarter, and allowed Carolina to get get a couple of stops. AJ, we just talked about
the stops. They won the game because of the stops, Jacob.
Yeah.
If they don't get those stops, what did we text at the beginning of the fourth quarter? You, Dana, and me.
Yeah, we said.
I didn't think they would get enough stops, so the offense may have scored every time, but you had to get stops to win.
I was in the same boat as you, yeah.
Had to. And I wasn't sure they could do it, but they got them, and those kids were on the field for a lot of those. There were 18 snaps over 5 possessions. I haven't broken down yet exactly how many snaps Grimes was on the field during those 18 snaps, how many of those he played. He was on there for the first 3 and out, so because I've already watched that this morning, the first 3 and out, so we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. And let's talk about some of the older guys that played a lot of snaps. We just kind of touched about the freshmen that saw minimal, but you got the likes of Chaz Surratt, Jeremiah Gemmel, Trey Morrison, and Patrice Renee played 95 snaps. That's a ton. It's too much. AJ, 2 of those guys ended up making kind of game-changing plays in the end. It kind of ended up sealing the game for Carolina in Chaz Surratt and Patrice Renee. Renee had a really good pass block that got Carolina off the field on 3rd down, and then Chaz Surratt with a big sack on 4th down. That was huge for the team. But focusing on Surratt and Gemmel alone, you got 2 guys that are basically playing every snap at the linebacker position. We heard the coaches kind of rant and rave about the likes of Eugene Asante, Kadri Jackson before the season. Those are guys that really aren't seeing a lot of snaps, if any, during real games right now. What does that maybe say about where that linebacker depth is right now? And are you surprised that those guys aren't seeing the field a little bit more than they have been?
Based on what we were told in August, yes.
Yeah.
Especially Asante. Yeah, I kind of figured that. Remember in August, we were told that Chaz was getting some work at that hybrid spot.
Yeah,
because Asante was coming along so well that, maybe they could put him out in the field for 20 snaps and Chaz could play the hybrid spot, and that way Tamon's not on the field so much and Hopper's not on the field so much. And sort of like the way they use Azudu to spell guys on the offensive line, they could sort of use Asante to move Chaz around, and maybe then he could play with Chaz out there and spell Gemmel some. We haven't seen that happen. So, look, 95 snaps for Renee and Chaz were out of necessity. They both have played a ton of snaps in games before, so at least they've done it. And there was a confidence that, look, them at snap number 85 is a better option than anybody else at snap number 5, 10, 15, whatever it is. And that was right, because they both made the 2 key plays of the game defensively, Renee's PBU and Chaz's sack. And Chaz did have 14 tackles, and I just think that Chaz's presence on the field is big for this team. And I think Renee being, in the secondary, because he talks a lot more than Morrison. Morrison's a really good player, but he's not a big talker, even though he's talking more this year than he has before. But Patrice just kind of has that characteristic. So I think having those older guys out there, if you're filling in some other spots, they can get away with it. And they did get away with it Saturday. But yeah, 95 snaps from both Gemmel and Chaz. They're obviously the better option, but you would think that based on what we were told, that Asante and even Kadri Jackson would get on the field a little bit more. And it makes you wonder next year when Chaz is gone.
Yeah.
They're going to have a fairly green guy out there with Gemmel. These last few games are opportunities to get dude snaps and get them ready for next year. And that doesn't mean you throw in this season, because they're 6-2 and they got a lot to play for. Got to have an eye on next year as well. And I think a lot of people that have an interest in this football team would like to see some of those guys play for no other reason than get ready for next year. Asante needs snaps. If he's going to be playing 60, 70, 80 snaps a game next year, get him another 80 to 100 this year to get him ready and get that stuff on film. Let him make mistakes and learn from those. Mistakes are great for young players because you make them, it's on film, and you can learn from them. So the more you make now, the more he has all season to study film and improve on those things.
Yeah, exactly. Before we move on to a little bit more on the offensive side of the ball, let's kind of stick with the defense here for a little bit more. Total defense, Carolina ranks number 64 in the country, 414 yards per game. Rush defense, 56, 152 yards per game. This is a team that had really struggled to force turnovers, which for some reason has been a theme of this program even before Mac Brown got here over the last 4 or 5 years. Just Carolina on the defensive side of the ball really, really struggles to force turnovers. AJ, looking at this defense, it's been, I think, a defense overall for a majority of the year that I think it's probably safe to say has has been poor. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. You could probably use some more harsh terms if you wanted to. I'll go with the word poor and be a little bit nice to him. Are you at all surprised with how poor the defense has been this year? And how is there any way to kind of see them improve going into the rest of the season? I mean, they really need to when you look at how elite Carolina's offense has been for a majority of the season. I've been saying it really since day one, and I think you have been too. If Carolina's defense could just be average, I mean, this team's probably undefeated right now. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, but they're not average.
Far from it.
And they're not undefeated. They're kind of where they should be.
Yeah, I can be honest with you.
Going back to August again. And that's why when you follow our stuff, follow it in August too.
Yeah, it's huge.
There's a lot of good stuff in August. You kind of look ahead to the season and the reference points as you go through the season.
Mm-hmm.
But we did say many, many times that the defensive line is average. The defense has a chance to be really good. Now, in fairness to Jay Bateman and the defense, they've lost so many guys in the secondary.
It's crazy. Yeah.
If the defensive line was average and Michael and Duck weren't injured, this would be a different thing. But injuries are part of football.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Projecting, after losing Crawford and Strobridge, projecting that Bahasic, Taylor, and Tamari Fox would be at that level was just wishful thinking for a lot of people. And they're just not at that point. Look how long it took Crawford and Strobridge to get that good. Jason Strobridge didn't become an NFL player until his 5th year on campus.
Mm-hmm.
And he worked his rear end off. And he had a lot of nice offers coming out of high school. It's hard to become a really good football player.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much work that goes into it, so much time. That's why a minute ago we're talking about the film room. There's so much that these kids do in February and March and April and May that make them better in the fall. And that's why getting stuff on film is so important. As far as the Tar Heels up front, I mean, they're just not ready. They don't have the guys. They don't have the volume of guys. They're getting close with Murphy and Penner getting on the field more. I mean, Murphy's had a few games in the 20 snap range. You kind of want to see that the rest of the way.
Yeah.
And he's a talented guy. He's got more high-end talent, I think, than the three established players up front. And maybe Murphy's a starter next year. Who the heck knows? But the defense just isn't very good. I mean, you don't need me to say that. That's I'm not worrying about feelings here. The numbers back it up. Their red zone defense is like 87 in the country. They're not offering a whole lot of resistance. The turnover issue, they've forced 9 turnovers in 8 games. There are 24 teams in the nation that have played 8 games. And only Louisville with 6, Texas Tech with 7, and South Alabama with 8 have forced fewer turnovers. And this is the swarming defense we were told that would be a playmaking defense. You know, forcing turnovers. We thought this group would force a lot more turnovers. Now, that was before we knew there would be attrition in the secondary, but they're not. And it starts up front. The defensive line was getting whipped by Wake for a while for much of Saturday. They're not a very good defense. I don't think they're going to be a very good defense over the last 3 games, but it goes back to what we were saying earlier. Play these other guys, play more guys, at least be fresher. If you're going to be below average, be fresh and below average in the second half. I think that was part of why they had some success Saturdays, because they had some fresher guys out there, and they could get better, and you could see their growth. Look at how much Kamen Rucker's gotten better.
Mm-hmm.
Look at how much Murphy's gotten better. I mean, Tony Grimes, that doesn't happen if he's not grinding it every week and he's getting some reps on the field where he can see right there in front of him. That's what I need to work on.
Yeah.
So we're repeating ourselves a little bit, but I think that's what the last few games of the season need to be about as much as winning games. I mean, you want to win the games. That's first and foremost. But the only way they're going to get better, I think, is by playing more guys.
Yeah, I completely agree, especially on that defensive side of the ball, because it just hasn't been good enough, and I don't think any Carolina player or coach or fan would disagree with that. So, but AJ, switching the focus, we talked about the defense a lot in this podcast. Let's switch the focus over to the offense for a second. We talked a lot about Sam Howell yesterday in our 3 Things video we do after the game. If you haven't seen that, go click on the THI logo below and hit our channel, and you'll see it at the very top. Pinned to our YouTube channel. So definitely check that out if you haven't seen it already. But another guy that's been sensational over the past few games and was really good again yesterday was De'Ami Brown. 8 catches, 163 yards, 2 touchdowns. Then you go back to the Virginia game, he had 11 catches for 240 yards, 3 touchdowns. I mean, that's exceptional. I did an ISO video on Diame yesterday, which will be up on our channel over the next couple of days. So stay tuned for that. But I watched every single snap he took. I recorded every single snap he took. And, man, he's an impressive wide receiver, AJ. He's a guy that his routes are crisp. He finds ways to get open. He's such a deep threat with his speed. I mean, Diame Brown is a guy that is really turned into one of Sam Howell's favorite targets, and rightly so. But Diame is a guy that, especially over the past few games, is really starting to show, just how good he is and how critical he is for this offense in terms of them being successful.
He can run every route.
Mm-hmm.
And he catches the ball, and he's got great acceleration. He's also fought off DBs for balls. He had some really tough catches.
Yeah.
He's turning himself into an NFL receiver.
He is. Mm-hmm.
And you're seeing it every week. He does something a little bit different than we hadn't seen before. And you're like, wow. I mean, this growth is mushrooming with Diame. And you could tell even when we talk to him after games or during the week that there's even more confidence.
Oh, yeah.
And I love seeing that because, I mean, he's always been talented. We knew when he came in that this guy could be what he's become. And you don't often get to see kids that become what you think when they're true freshmen or when they sign. Hey, that guy might be this when he's at UNC or wherever school they go to. Rarely do kids actually ever do that.
Yeah.
Diame is in the process of doing that. Michael Carter has had his stretch of getting all kinds of love. Javante's got a ton of love of late. Right now, Sam is the flavor of the nation. I mean,
rightly so.
He's put himself in a position where you can start thinking about, legacy and that kind of thing. And he's only played 21 games. That's how freaking good he is. But Diame is having an awesome season. He's going to blow past last year's numbers. I don't know what he had, like 51 or 52 receptions last year, but he's over 1,000 yards. He averaged 20 yards a catch. He's just off that in the reception the yards per catch. But that's one of the reasons is because he's doing more stuff. He's doing a lot more of the short game stuff. He was more of a deep ball guy last year. He's doing more of the short game stuff, and he's turning a lot of that into big gains. I love watching him play. I know that he grinds. I know that he was one of Sam's guys this offseason, that they worked together a lot. So there's tremendous chemistry there. And Carolina fans need to appreciate what Diame's doing because he's gonna have 1,000 yards again. He's going to end up catching 65, 70 balls at least in a little bit of a shortened season. And you're watching one of the better wide receivers that they've had here. I mean, he's really, really good, and he does everything well. Even that block yesterday on his brother's touchdown, I'm kind of old school, and I know the rules have changed and stuff like that, but I've always told if your helmet's in front of him and you hit him on the side, that ain't a violation. That's not an infraction. And it looked to me like the helmet was in the front. Back when I played in the old days in high school, that would not have been a flag. It would have been a touchdown. But maybe there's a little sibling stuff there because about 5 snaps later, Diame got himself a TD.
Yeah, exactly.
It was
part of the plan, right?
Longer.
It was a part of the plan. He wanted to get that touchdown over his brother.
I mean, how about the 2 best blocks of the day yesterday were by a wide receiver and running back?
Running back, yeah, I know.
and the Javante block and Diame commented, I think, on Twitter about Javante's block because apparently that guy was talking some trash to him. And you don't want to see anybody get hurt, and I hope he's okay. I don't remember if he came back in, to be honest with you.
I can't remember either.
But the best part about Javante's block was he just kind of stood over and looked at him.
Yeah, and then Michael Carter kind of runs into him, too, when he's doing it. It's actually kind of funny when you watch it over. It's a heck of a block, but Javante almost, tripped Michael Carter. It was great stuff. But
in a game where there were 112 points scored and 1,300 yards, the 2 plays that I'm taking away from it were a block by a wide receiver that was flagged and a block by a running back.
Yeah, it tells you all you need to know about the game right there. But yeah, I completely agree with what you said about Diame. He's been sensational this year, and he's turned into one of the best players on the team. But I don't think it's up for debate that he's got the best hairstyle on the team right now, too, AJ. I mean, he's got the nice deal. I don't know if y'all haven't seen it, go check out his post-game interview yesterday. He's got it red and kind of puffed up like that. Man, I'm a big fan of it. So if y'all haven't seen that post-game interview, click below.
He clearly puts a lot of time into his presentation.
He does, man. He does. Hey, you know what they say, look good, play good. So
look, when you're in college, express yourself, man.
Exactly. And I think Diame's doing that on and off the field right now. So So credit to him right now. He's been really good over the past few weeks, especially AJ. Before we wrap it up, let's do a little look ahead. The last 3 games for Carolina, obviously coming up. You got Notre Dame at home. Following this week's bye week, you have Notre Dame at home. Then they travel down to Miami for the last ACC game of the year. And then they wrap it up in Kenan Stadium with a December game against Western Carolina. And then maybe potentially a bowl. We'll maybe touch on that a little bit at the end. We don't really know how that's all going to play out. But, Notre Dame game is going to be tough. I think Carolina's probably thankful that they've got a bye week going into that. Obviously, it's exam week this week too. So I think that bye week kind of came at a perfect time, especially when you consider what Carolina's played 7 weeks straight now. So it's been a crazy season for Carolina so far, and one in which they haven't really had a chance to breathe. But then now they get that. Then they go down to Miami to wrap the ACC slate up, which is going to be a tough game. Miami's a good team right now and continue to find ways to win. And then obviously you expect that the Western Carolina game should be a pretty walk in the park win for Carolina. But those Notre Dame and Miami games, AJ, I mean, it doesn't get any easier for Carolina to end the season. And I think you could probably argue those are two Carolina's toughest games of the season, kind of coming back to back.
Yeah, the schedule through 8 games hasn't been as difficult as we thought it might, because it looked on paper in August. And I think with having by the way, Notre Dame has an open date coming up.
Yeah, they do.
Too.
They do.
So, but I think it's good that Carolina's in exams, and exams have come early, because I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't want to have to sit around and wait 13 days to play Notre Dame.
Mm-mm.
You want to be in routine as much as possible going into the kind of game that will be hyped a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Any really good team, any number 2 team in the country coming in would get everyone's attention in a big time way. But when you throw the name Notre Dame on top of it, it just adds to it.
Bigger. Mm-hmm.
And Notre Dame could be unranked and coming in, and it would be a big deal, because that uniform, the helmet, everything it represents, they are the Yankees.
Yeah.
So I think it's actually good that they're in exam week. They're going to focus on all that. There was a reason Mac didn't really want a game on the 21st, because of exam week.
Yeah.
Get that taken care of. Have them totally focus on that. We're not going to have any media availability with the players this week, because it's exam week, and that's fine. And then once they get that over with, they start preparing for Notre Dame, which is the day after Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be an awesome challenge for the Tar Heels and opportunity. The greatest thing about a big challenge is it's also a big opportunity. And there are a lot of things that this team hasn't done well this year, but there's also a lot of things that they have done well. Mm-hmm. The Notre Dame game will give them an opportunity to elevate what they've done well and minimize what they haven't done well, and have a chance to pull off a huge win, or at least be competitive and get better. I continue to harp on the whole get better thing, because I think in year 2, when there's a really big vision about where this thing can go and should go, you don't dismiss getting better in game number 22.
No.
And that's what this will be, game number 22 of the Mac Brown era. But it is a big deal. It's a game where you gotta try to do everything well in order to win, because the only way you're going to beat Notre Dame is if you do everything well. You can't break down on special teams. They can't get whipped at the line of scrimmage. They can't turn the ball over. They've got to be able to get out there and play well. So it's an opportunity to do that. The things that we talked about through a lot of this podcast, which has been kind of negative, they have a chance to change that a little bit for one game and do it against by far the best team on their schedule. Mm-hmm. And then you go to Miami. We won't even deal with that until they get through Notre
Dame.
But closing with Western Carolina and a potential bowl game, and I'll just say that I'm hearing that bowl games aren't 100% for obvious reasons. And you and I were talking about before we recorded this. So we don't know if there's going to be a bowl game or not. They may just have 3 games left for these kids. They play Western Carolina on the 12th, I believe. Mm-hmm. So that's 2 weeks before the bowl games would start anyway. Because the bowl games usually start right after Christmas, like for the power conference teams. Mm-hmm. So you aren't really going to get extra practices. I don't really know where a lot of the value would come, other than just another game of game reps for a lot of kids. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure there's going to be bowl games. It would be great if there are bowl games, because these guys need more snaps.
Yeah,
that's the way I look at it. I'm a big snap guy.
Mm-hmm.
Get more reps.
Yeah.
But none of that really matters until they get through Notre Dame. That's just it. We're going to learn a lot about this team. We're going to learn a lot about how they prepare, because they have a lot of time to prepare. And having Notre Dame come into Kenan Stadium would be cool. I've covered Notre Dame, I don't know, like 8 games. I think I've covered Notre Dame games before. Mm-hmm. And it's always a treat to see that helmet run out on the field. It's one of the coolest things in all the sports. So from a personal perspective, I'm looking forward to it, Jacob.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's safe to say that over these next couple of weeks, the defense needs to figure some stuff out, because they played like they did yesterday against Notre Dame. And I don't even want to think what the final
But
score.
it's an opportunity. And that's the beautiful
exactly.
thing about sports, and I guarantee you that Mac Brown would say it too. The beautiful thing about having another game is it's another opportunity.
Opportunity to get better, exactly.
And they do have enough talent where they should be better than they have been.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe they rise up, and this is the game where they make it all happen.
It wouldn't surprise me at all, because I think one thing we've seen from this Carolina team really since Mac Brown took over, it seems like when they play the better teams, the bigger opponents, particularly this year, they tend to play better and they tend to win. Or at least
I think the offense will be fine. I think this offense scores against anybody.
Yeah.
They score against anybody.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you could argue they're the best offense in the country. You could argue that because they've got a record-setting quarterback and they run the ball so well.
Yeah,
they got two NFL running backs.
Mm-hmm.
And they run block like future NFL linemen. They don't pass block like that.
Far from it.
But they may have the best offense in the country. So they're going to move the ball. They're going to score points against Notre Dame.
Oh, yeah.
The question will be, can the defense be average? There's no word average again. If they're average, Carolina's got a chance to win that game.
Exactly. I think we're guaranteed to at least see another shootout during that Notre Dame game. But we'll deal with that. We'll deal with that.
That stuff.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know, when Carolina posted their notes from the game, they think the 5 highest scoring games at Keene Stadium ever. I've covered 4 of them. I covered the Bunning era and the Larry era, and right now in the transition era is what we'll call it. And takes a little more time to transition and get really good on defense, as we're seeing. But, you know, I was very envious of that 31-17 Virginia-Louisville game.
Yeah.
Wow. Football.
Defense.
Yeah, real football. Guys hit.
Exactly. Well, I mean, you talked about covering a lot of those games in terms of high scoring. You might not be done yet, AJ. You might be having a couple more coming up, and I wouldn't be shocked if you did. So yeah, I mean, Carolina 59-53 win over Wake Forest yesterday. It wasn't pretty. I think I said this to end the 3 things yesterday. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't easy, but in the end, a win's a win. So credit to Carolina for finding a way yesterday and getting it done. But that's going to do it for us today, AJ. Appreciate you hopping on here and doing the THI Postscript Podcast. And if you guys are just kind of tuning in if this is your first Postscript Podcast, to do this every Sunday following a football game. So be sure to look for that. And as always, guys, if you've enjoyed the video, be sure to like it. Be sure to share it. We'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks. Guys.